Hey guys, so I'm here again to read for you today from your social studies book, okay? For two reasons. One reason is the assignment that got posted today, that's a ReadWorks passage, is about the first shots of the Civil War. Remember the war where we fight to end slavery and we literally fight ourselves. It's the northern states versus the southern states. How it began is in this lesson that I'm going to read to you that coincides with the ReadWorks passage you're supposed to do today that's due on Friday. And also in this lesson is information about Abraham Lincoln. He was the president during the Civil War. And I say that because not only is it super important, but my assignment that I post tomorrow, Thursday, is on Abraham Lincoln. So this will be some background knowledge for that too. Okay, remember there's no assignment linked to this video, but if you watch it, it may help you with some information and just kind of stay along in our social studies lesson. I know we're at the end of the year, but all I'm asking you to do is watch and listen. All right, here we go. So this is lesson 2, because you got lesson 1 last week. It's titled War That Divides the Country, literally. Here we go. A Nation Divided. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln of Illinois was elected President of the United States. Lincoln's election made supporters of slavery very angry. The map on this page explains why. We'll look at this in a second because this is kind of important. Look at the map and find the Western territories such as the Nebraska Territory and New Mexico Territory. You can see here because I'm pointing to it. Everyone knew these territories would soon become states in the United States, but would they be free states where slavery was not allowed, or would they be slave states where slavery was allowed? Abraham Lincoln wanted them to be free states. He was opposed, which means against, the spread of slavery. This worried many Southern leaders. They were afraid that Lincoln might try to end slavery everywhere in the United States. He did. In December 1860, South Carolina decided to secede, which means to break away from the United States. Now, let's think about that for a second. The state of South Carolina literally can't leave. It can't detach itself from land and float away to become an island. All it means is that it did not follow the country's rules. It wanted to be its own free independent area because they were technically part of the southern states where slavery was allowed, and they didn't want to have slavery, so they just wanted to break away and secede. Over the next 4 months, 10 other southern states also seceded. They wanted to continue with slavery, and they didn't want to abide by President Lincoln's rules. These states joined to form the Confederate States of America, or the Confederacy. The states that remained in the United States were known as the Union, United Union. Lincoln said that the southern states did not have the right to secede. He was ready to fight to keep the United States from breaking apart. So these dark green states here are northern. They're in the north. They're the northern states that are considered the Union. They wanted slavery to be illegal, and they were known as the free states. Everyone had their freedom. The states in orange were known as the Confederacy, the Confederate States of America, and they were for slavery. They did not want to get rid of it. So the North and the South, Union, Confederacy. New York supports the Union. On April 12, 1861, Confederate soldiers fired on Fort Sumter, a United States fort off the coast of South Carolina. This was the beginning of the Civil War, which was fought between the northern and southern states from 1861 to 1865. Lincoln knew the Union would need a large army to defeat the Confederacy. He called for each state to send soldiers to the army. Thousands of New Yorkers answered this call. James Morrison was a young soldier from Syracuse. He wrote to his sister about life in the army, and this is what he said. I'm used to resting on anything, even in the mud. I lay down at night on the ground, and the next morning when I would awake, The water would be 2 or 3 inches deep where I lay, but it never disturbed my sleep. James Morrison was just one of more than 450,000 New Yorkers who fought for the Union. New York sent more soldiers to the Civil War than any other state. New York supported the Union in other ways as well. New York's busy factories built rifles and made uniforms for the Union Army. In Brooklyn, the Continental Iron Works built the Monitor, one of the world's first ironclad warships. New York farmers helped by growing food for their soldiers. A golden opportunity. In September 1862, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. A proclamation is an official order. This order said that as of January 1st, 1863, all enslaved people in the Confederacy would be forever free. President Lincoln once said that the Emancipation Proclamation was the greatest event of the 1800s, and I agree. The Emancipation Proclamation also stated that African Americans could join the Union Army. African Americans had not always been allowed to fight in the Union Army. Now, Lincoln was hoping that African American soldiers would help defeat the Confederacy and end slavery. "This is our golden opportunity," said the abolitionist leader, Frederick Douglass. Douglass urged African Americans to join the Army, saying, "The iron gate of our prison stands half open. One brave rush from the North will fling it wide open, while 4 millions of our brothers and sisters shall march into liberty," meaning freedom. Nearly 200,000 African Americans volunteered to serve in the Union Army. For the first 2 years of the Civil War, all the soldiers in the Union Army were volunteers. In 1863, however, Lincoln and Congress decided that the Union needed more soldiers. The government held a draft. A draft is a selection of people required to serve in the military. Some of you kiddos that watch sports may know what draft means, because your sports may have drafts as well, where they pick players from their ending of college years to join like the NFL or baseball and things like that. There were protests against the draft in New York. Some protesters said that they didn't want to fight to end slavery. In New York City, draft protests turned into riots. In July 1863, rioters burned government buildings and attacked police. More than 100 people were killed before the riots ended. Soldiers, nurses, and spies. New York women also helped the war effort. When she was 19 years old, Sarah Rosetta Wakeman left her home on a central New York farm. She dressed as a man, called herself Lyons Wakeman, and joined the Union Army. She was in the Army from 1862 to 1864, fighting in several battles. No one ever discovered that she was a woman, not even when she visited other soldiers who knew her from her hometown. Elizabeth Blackwell. She sounds familiar. Some of you did a report on her. Helped the Union Army in a different way. She graduated from New York's Geneva Medical College in 1849. She was the first woman doctor in the United States. During the Civil War, Blackwell used her medical knowledge to train nurses. She taught them how to take care of soldiers on the battlefield. You remember Harriet Tubman from reading about the Underground Railroad. During the Civil War, Tubman traveled secretly to the South once again. This time, she helped the Union Army by working as a spy. Tubman was an expert at moving from place to place without being noticed. This allowed her to gather information about the enemy. She even helped lead attacks on Confederate forces. One Union general said of Tubman, "She made many a raid inside the enemy's lines, showing remarkable courage." Winning the war. In 1864, President Lincoln put General Ulysses S. Grant in charge of the Union Army. Gavin did his report on him. Grant and his soldiers began fighting their way toward the Confederate capital of Richmond, Virginia. Union and Confederate soldiers fought fiercely for every inch of ground. In April 1865, Grant's forces captured Richmond. General Robert E. Lee, the Confederacy's leading general, surrendered. The Civil War was finally over. President Lincoln congratulated Grant and the Union Army on their victory, but Lincoln did not feel it was a time for celebration. He knew that victory had come at a very high price. More American soldiers died in the Civil War than in any other war in our country's history. One important result of the Civil War was that the United States did not permanently break apart. The states that had formed the Confederacy remained part of the United States. Another important result was the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. This amendment officially abolished slavery everywhere in the United States in 1865. Finally, the nation mourns. President Lincoln believed that after the war, it would be important to bind up the nation's wounds. He looked forward to helping the United States recover from the Civil War. But on April 14th, 1865, while watching a play in Washington, D.C., Lincoln was shot. He died the next day. Lincoln's body was taken home to Illinois. As the funeral train traveled through New York, thousands of people came out to say goodbye. Businesses and courts closed when Lincoln's body arrived in New York City. A sign hung on City Hall saying, "The nation mourns." Lincoln's life will be in the video that I'm asking you to watch tomorrow. So thank you for listening, and see you later.